Hi, welcome to Learning Leaders Spotlight, the podcast where we interview learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm your host, Leanne Langford, president of Training Pros, an L&D contract staffing company. At Training Pros, we like to say, when you have more projects than people, let us help you find the right candidate to start your project with confidence. Today, I'm so excited to have as my guest, Renny Bloch. He's the Director of Global Learning and Leadership Development at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. Welcome, Renny.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
It's so great to have you here. So can you tell our audience just 60-second overview of who you are and what you do at work?
Yeah. So, as you said, I am currently the Director of Learning and Leadership Development at Regeneron. That's a biotech company. We're headquartered in Westchester, New York, but we also have locations in multiple parts of the nation, but also globally in 8 countries currently. So the question, what do I do? So I've been in the field for 20 years and my family still doesn't really know what I do. It's kind of one of those careers that's a little bit hard to explain, but in short, I work with leaders and teams at all levels of a system to help them be more effective, more efficient, more engaged, and overall just be the best possible versions of themselves, both at work, but also in life.
It's a wonderful mission. It's a wonderful thing you get to do with your life. You get to help people for a living.
Yes, it is one of the things that attracted me to the field and that I really get juice and jazz from, each and every day.
And I know what you mean. Nobody in my life outside of L&D knows what I do for a living.
Right.
No clue. So what first attracted you to learning and development?
Yeah, well, it's definitely nothing that I really knew existed as a kid. And actually that question, what do you want to be when you grow up, was one of the most stressful questions that I'd be asked because I never really knew. I was always jealous of people that had clarity in that response. When I got to college, I declared psychology as a major since I was interested in people, and I declared business as a minor to balance it out and have maybe some quote unquote harder skills. And through that process, I was lucky enough to take a class. I was actually in the business school in organizational behavior, and I really loved the class. I loved the concepts, but I didn't make the connection of doing that stuff, if you will, as a career. So life went on, finished school, had some jobs after graduation, and thought about, all right, what do I want to do? Now that question again. And I started pursuing doctorate programs in clinical psychology, thinking, okay, that might be a great route to help people and have a practice, research, maybe teach a little bit. And as I was researching that, I came across the organizational psychology degree. And the more I learned about it, the more I read about it, the more interested and excited I actually got by it. It's really this marriage of psychology and business in the workplace, helping both be more engaged, more productive. So I actually pivoted and applied and got a master's degree from Teachers College. It's at Columbia University in organizational psychology. And for the most part have been working in various aspects of the larger field and umbrella since that time.
That's a great story. I love it.
Yeah, thanks.
A lot of us did not know we wanted to go into L&D when we were young and in college. And truthfully, I think it's a blessing to not know where you want to go. Just know that I need a degree or I need to get this education before I figure out what I want.
Yeah, and actually that mindset, if you want to be a little academic, that growth mindset, if you will, I can learn, I can do anything. I think in hindsight is absolutely right. When you're in it, it feels really stressful and overwhelming. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to, quote unquote, succeed in life? But I totally agree. That idea of staying open, learning, being receptive, it really does align with what we attempt to try to teach other people to do and be in their day to day, and also in leading and managing their people and teams.
That's great. Especially, I'm a mom of 2 college kids. So
Yeah,
yep, leave your options open, guys.
yeah, that's right.
So we've had a lot of changes in L&D over the years. You've been here 20 years. I've been here 32. What are the biggest changes you've seen in maybe the last 3 to 5 years?
Over the years, I think we've really increased our understanding so much about how people really learn, how they develop, how they grow. And we know that experience is key. But experience alone is not enough. And we sort of knew this, and I think we're doubling down on that. But we need to be really intentional and learning agile, learning agility as this concept and spend time learning from experiences. So I think um, we are getting better at not just sending people to classes, even though that's still exists and will likely continue to exist, but it's okay. Well, what did you learn from not only the class, but all right, when you do something, how are we deconstructing that learning? You know, so I think that's uh, has been evolving. Understand, Center of Creative Leadership came out with the 70-20-10. That's likely familiar to a lot of people, but essentially, how do people learn? Well, 70% from experience, 20% from feedback, mentoring, coaching, stuff like that. And 10% from books, classroom, stuff like that. Yet, that equation is generally inverse. So 70% of learning generally is thought to be go to this class, go to this program, go to this workshop. Because it's easy. It's easy. So I do think that over the years, we've been better at helping people learn by helping leaders and managers ask questions, listen more actively, help the learner, discover their own ahas, if you will, of what they learned. So I've seen that kind of take shape. And even now, in talent reviews and things like that, we're not so much about what can we send them? What can we offer them? What experiences can we get them? And how do we be more agile with moving people into different roles, functions to get that experience?
That is a really strong change. I definitely worked at multiple companies back in my corporate days, and one of them stands out as that was part of our succession planning process. It was at GE, and it was not just what classes can we send them to? Okay, so here's where we think they can go. Here's what they're destined. What can we do? What kind of experiences? What kind of assignments? What kind of projects can we put them on? They're going to help them get there.
Yeah, that's right. In order for that to happen effectively, we need to create the space and the environment for people to feel safe enough to actually distill their learning and have this space, psychological safety, is popularized by Amy Edmondson over the last number of years. Is gaining more and more traction. But this idea of how do we make people feel safe enough to learn vis-a-vis by making mistakes, trying something they've never done before, saying, I don't know, can you help me? Those kind of things, to learn, to practice and to reflect is even more understood now than before. And I think continues to gain some traction. I guess just to answer the question in a little bit more detail now that we're talking about it, it also seems there's a lot more interest and receptivity nowadays to cultivating self-awareness and what we call social awareness, understanding others. When we think about leading people and leading teams, and these concepts, when you're able to gain some mastery in them, you don't have to be the master, but more and more mastery, it really does continue to lead to better relationships, better learning, better outcomes, better creativity, better innovation. So we know these things. And I think they're beginning to take root a little bit more. And then related, I think mindfulness. So the term is becoming quite diluted in a lot of aspects, but it is becoming a little bit more commonplace. At least I'm trying to bring it into a little bit more commonplace through L&D experiences. And also well-being initiatives, depending on, where people are getting support from. But I personally have become much, much more invested in learning about and practicing these mindfulness and meditation concepts. And I'm trying to bring them in, to programs and experience. So I used to have a lot of judgment about these concepts. And mainly because I had an uninformed view of what they are and what they're intended to do. But now that I've learned more, I've really become more patient. I practice these things, become more patient, more understanding, less reactive, and just more present, as a person and as a leader. And I think those are the things that really make effective leaders, that idea of connecting to people. So I see there being a little bit more receptivity and movement, in the next, what's begun to be a movement is I think going to continue to be a movement around those concepts.
So I love that. Yes. I was introduced to mindfulness maybe 8 years ago. And I initially was very like rolling my eyes, going, yeah, this is going to help me. But it really did.
Yeah. 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 It's easy to dismiss if you don't understand it.
If you haven't tried it,
Yeah.
and you don't get the benefit the first time.
Yeah. Sorry. That's exactly right.
You have to keep trying it. So, you've kind of touched on where you think we're headed, but I mean, are there other things that you can predict where learning development is headed in the next 5 years?
Yeah. I mean, to the best I can, just from what I see, experience, read. So, though I think we're always going to have a need for these in-person, in-depth, programs and experiences, and I think they're important. I think we are moving toward even more online, on-demand, customized, micro learning. And all those are a lot of big kind of terms and buckets, but when you put them together, I really think that's where people and organizations and more senior leaders want, this quick, snappy, targeted learning. And, while I think we do continue to head in this direction, I personally am still cautious if these methods are really providing the intended impact. So they seem quick, easy, snappy, and I do think that they're helpful. But as far as real learning and growth, for me personally, the jury is still out about them. But I do think that's where we're learning, moving towards. Also, this idea of virtual simulations and learning, it's already here. And I think it's going to just continue to get better. So, for example, I've seen some demos or I've heard about them, but, imagine that, you need to give some really tough feedback to somebody. And, imagine being in a virtual setting and basically having an avatar to give this feedback to or have this tough conversation. And then you could get some feedback around, how did you do? How did you show up? And possibly what can you continue working on to get better? So I think that is definitely going to continue to happen. Actually, in Teams, we're using Zoom now, but in Teams, they already have a way to record yourself, and you can get feedback on your speaking and presenting style. So I think that is also going to continue to get better. But in the L&D space, I think where we can step in is trying to provide some more guidance and support. So when people get feedback, all right, what do I do with this? I got some feedback on X, Y, or Z. And I think our role will continue to evolve into like helping them take action on some of the feedback they're getting. On a more practical note, I think we're going to continue to learn and support this idea of multi-generational and global workforces. This, again, it isn't new, but it's getting more and more complex and nuanced. And I think it's going to be something that we need to continue to support in order to succeed in these matrix, multi-everything workforces.
Interesting. I like that. I have two Gen Xers, no millennials in my house, but my company has people in 4 generations right now. That's a lot. And it's a small company, so I can't imagine these larger companies, they're dealing with that.
Yeah. Yes.
So, yeah. And I find Gen X has a completely different thought pattern about work than I'm Gen X. We were all like, earn money, get promotions, get titles, all the wrong things, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah, they have a completely different thought process about it. So it'll be an interesting experiment to see 4 generations in the workplace together.
Yeah. And how people learn, interact, and all the things. And, and despite all that, even though I do think there's a lot to attend to, despite all that, when we strip it away, I do still believe we're still humans. We have human needs. We have human connections. There's all these other concepts that I think are much more common than uncommon across the generation. So it's not throwing all of it away, but it's just learning how to be a little bit more inclusive and broaden our collective understanding about how to collaborate, how to interact, how to communicate, these types of things.
It's fantastic. Can you share with us, if you can remember, who was your most influential professional mentor in your career?
Oh, I love that question. I think mentors are so important, and I definitely will share a little bit about mine. And I guess before I get into that, though, I love the idea of trying to create mentoring relationships. And it happens a lot in the workplace and even outside the workplace through matching or any sort of ways of doing it. And I do think there's a lot of benefit from those types of things. And I still believe that the best mentoring relationships are organic. They happen rather than quote unquote being forced. Not that that's bad. And mine was very organic. And it's somebody that has really been the most influential person, not only in my career, but, subsequently sort of in my life. So he was somebody that initially really helped me translate a lot of this academic knowledge. So, I said I got my master's degree. I came out of a degree program, like, all right, I have a master's. Who's hiring me? And I knew nothing, not to take anything away from the quality of the program. It was just, I didn't know how to be a practitioner. So to translate, all these theories and models and approaches and ways of being into action, he was somebody that really helped deconstruct that and showed me how you actually do these things in action. So it started there, very much, let me learn. And then in time, he actually became my manager, which was also interesting, to learn and watch. Okay, how do you go from this idea of kind of buddy to boss, if you will? So he needed to, shift his relationship with me, but it didn't really shift that much. And a big thing I learned from there is because trust existed. Yes, you can be friends with a direct report or friends with a boss, but you both need to understand there's expectations and boundaries and, all that kind of stuff. He was also incredibly supportive and influential as at the time when I was working with him, which was at NYU Medical Center, a nonprofit academic medicine. And I was beginning to worry about getting pigeonholed into one industry, one institution. And I said, I'm curious, about learning and growing outside of these walls. And he was incredibly supportive of going, yes, I hate to lose you. I'd hate to see you go, but it's important for your own career longevity. And that meant so much to me because I see so many leaders and managers holding people back because it benefits them as an individual. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do if you're not on my team? Not that I was, you're irreplaceable, but, just that idea of like losing people you work with, people you like. So I actually ended up leaving and then had the opportunity to rejoin him. And I follow him to a new organization because of the way he was with me and what he was able to do for me. So, I could go on and on. I'll stop there, but very, very helpful, very appreciative. And I let him know, which I think is also another really important thing for people. And like when people have an impact on you, let them know. Let them know. It's not that hard to do. And they will guaranteed appreciate hearing and knowing that that was the impact they had on you.
I love that. I also I had mentors in my life, but I also have sought out on a regular basis, bringing in interns and people that I can help along their journey, not with any intention to keep them in my company, but just work with me, let me help you grow, and then fly a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And, to that point, I also, want to support, for anyone out there, like you can have multiple mentors as you should. It's not like one person can fulfill every, need or aspect. So, seek out different mentors for different things.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And you can never stop having mentors until you're ready to retire. And then you need a mentor to take you into retirement.
It's true. That transition is incredibly tricky. Yeah. Which is a whole other conversation, but yes.
Yes. So what skill have you found to be the hardest to find right now?
It's a little out of my scope. I mean, I'm not in the position of looking for skill per se. However, it amazes me when we're interviewing, I'm speaking a little bit niche now, like, learning and development, leader development, training, facilitation, coaching. It really is amazing that a lot of people don't have the basics down, the basics of connecting with people, of listening well, of answering questions that you're asked, not answering questions that you want to answer, like politician style. So, some of the basics I think that we need to really look for and appreciate. Um, so that would be one area. Also, the idea of translating complex ideas into simple ways. I mean, that is an incredibly difficult thing. And that's what makes a great teacher, somebody that can explain something really, really complicated into terms that are easy to understand. And above and beyond all that is, can you establish trust and credibility quickly enough? Uh, it's a subtlety, without being too braggadocious or too humble. Like, how do you find that sweet spot? So those are just some general things that I'm seeing, like when we're interviewing and looking for candidates or applicants that will thrive well in our field, but also in our particular culture.
So those are great things to talk about. And I have noticed that we, as a society, we listen to answer, not listen to learn. As you were
Absolutely.
saying,
Yeah,
it's not a skill we've learned in school or
that's
college.
right. And most of these things, there's no classes on listening. There's questions or there's classes on critical thinking and, presenting, but that idea of listening, we teach a lot of different ways to listen. But you're right. I love that you said that, because if you're not good at it, well, you've probably never been taught or practiced it. So give yourself a little bit of a break there.
True, very true. So let's switch gears, and why don't you tell our listeners where you get your industry news and information?
Okay. Um, so in general, I try to get insights from multiple sources, as I suspect most of us do. So, some of the traditional ones, albeit they're still very good, like Gartner, McKinsey puts out some great research and articles, DDI, Harvard Business Review, tons of stuff there. Center of Creative Leadership. These are organizations that I subscribe to their newsletters, magazines, and I'm always learning new things. So definitely, that's kind of the foundational. Subscribe to these types of things. I also join select communities of practice, in particular those that really don't have any other agenda attached to it, other than to share, learn, and support each other. And I really get insight into, what are other people doing? What are their challenges? How are they overcoming their challenges? What solutions are they using, whether internal, external? So those I find incredibly valuable, as well as just, getting support. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is the thing a lot of places are struggling with. And then I also try to broaden my view of industry, and I subscribe to a lot of substance and other newsletters from a range of topics like philosophy. So, just for example, like the Daily Stoic, I think is great if you're at all interested in Stoicism. A lot of mindfulness newsletters, emotional intelligence, and others. So, you can see from some of my answers, I'm influenced by these things, and I do find myself continually incorporating quotes or ideas or mindsets from these sources into programs or coaching engagements or other things that I support. So that's kind of a collage of places that I get insights from.
I think it's great. You definitely you need some industry news, but you also need some of your company's industry news, and then become a well-rounded person going outside of it. That's great. What is one book that you would recommend someone wanting to move into leadership should read?
One goal, what a tough question. Well, I'm going to offer a few. If one is always difficult, but with a preface. So, my belief, in order to be great at this work, I really think you need to understand yourself and you need to be able to relate to others, as I've been saying. So some recommendations early on are get books on emotional intelligence. So for example, Daniel Goleman's book with the same title. I mean, you know, great book. It'll help you, in work and in life. Also working on authenticity and vulnerability. Again, we know more and more and more that effective leaders and coaches and trainers, like, you need that human side to you. So, any of Brene's Brown books, Dare to Lead. It's one of her big common ones, especially in the leadership space. And then, one of my favorite books, and it's really a balance of both academic and practical, is this book called Flawless Consulting. It's by Peter Bloch. And yeah, you nodding, you might know it.
Oh, yes.
Book offers so much advice and guidance on how to be a good consultant, but you really need to be a good consultant in order to be effective in a broader profession, in particular leadership and learning. So it does remind me I should go back and take a look at it. But those are, three-ish books that I would recommend sort of picking up, either reviewing or maybe starting for the first time.
So that's quite a list. That's great. And, the difficulty is picking one book is impossible.
Yeah.
Oh, Flawless Consulting. Yes, I read that in grad school, and that's come up before on this podcast.
Yeah.
And Dare to Lead has come up multiple times on this podcast.
Yeah.
So we're getting some agreement. We're starting to.
Yeah. It comes down again, like to the human side of this work, and in life. So yeah, of course, there's so many books on deep, on trust, on coaching, on, pick your thing, change. But, I think that these are general enough that you can't go wrong, especially if you're hearing themes now from them.
Well, you have been a wonderful guest. I have enjoyed our conversation very much. You've given a lot of great information for our listeners to hear. As a thank you, I would like to plant 5 trees in your name. Right now, we're planting in Canada around the Great Lakes. And that's our charity here at Training Pros. Is we've planted nearly 4,000 trees around the world to date.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll send you a certificate to mark the occasion, but you're going to have 5 trees in your name. And thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for doing this and supporting the profession and helping others get into it or reinforce what they're already doing. I think it's great. So you're welcome.
Okay. Well, that's it for this week on Learning Leader Spotlight. Be sure and tune in again next week.